I got this to say about that. April 14th, 2014. Uh, Beautiful day. Not really, it's cold, but whatever. Interesting week. I've always been interested in education because all of us suffer through the most boring classes, the most boring courses, the most boring teachers, and it's obvious that teachers, the curriculum the way it is, the schools the way they are, the way they're being taught doesn't work. Grow up, America. Grow up, world. It doesn't work. It's not effective. We all know. We took courses we didn't like, labored through them. We forget everything that we learned about it, did nothing to move us forward in terms of being better people, being smarter, being more rounded, whatever. Okay? So, I remember reading a book back in 1969, about a year out of college. It was called The Age of Discontinuity by Peter Drucker, probably one of the greatest management scholars of all time. And he's basically said that Hippocrates, who was the father of medicine, could not walk into any hospital, clinic, whatever. And this is back in 1969. This was before MRIs, before PET scans, before CAT scans, before all of the technologies, before the robot surgery we have. He says Hippocrates could not walk into any kind of a healing institution and figure out anything there. It wouldn't make sense to him. And he went on, same thing with engineers, same thing with scientists. Okay, all of the advances in the technology back in 1969. Okay, here we are, 2014. He said, but Socrates, the greatest teacher of all time, would be at home in any university classroom situation. So what's happened? Okay, it's obvious. Computers, technology, iPads, iPods, you name it. Okay, this phone that I'm holding in my hand, and I'm enabled to take a video and explain this without having to write anything down, and I'll post it on YouTube, and we can have a little conversation about this if you go to my blog. So, I've been saying this to my friends who are teachers, and I taught for a while, that it's over. That the conventional ways of instructing are dead. And until teachers and institutions get up to speed, it's going to be painful for everybody in the process. Yet, the institutions will stay with the way things are simply because that's the way they are, and people are conservative and are reluctant to change and don't feel threatened by the changes. But I'm sorry, the computer is smarter than all of us in terms of being able to instruct kids. How can a teacher possibly compete with sound, movement, color, and all of the things, and the feedback mechanism, the interactivity of a computer, to be able to learn something and progress it at the speed at which you're learning, and not have to worry about the competition from the kids around you. So, I've been noticing this more and more when I go to inner city schools, and it doesn't matter. I've only found like one school, and it was a school in Brighton that taught the La Sistema. There's a Venezuelan economist who took instruments into barrios in Venezuela and created communities of learning about how to create beautiful music and transform those communities. And the school in Brighton reflects all of that. So kids don't sit in conventional classrooms. They sit around at tables teaching in groups, assisting each other. They learn poetry. They learn how to write. They produce a book every year. Every classroom produces a book of poetry and paintings and photographs. It's so creative. So that's the only school I've seen in all my travels in doing my lectures to kids on, how they can improve themselves and how they can become anything they want to be. But in those classes where I see computers, where I see iPads, where I see kids interfacing with machines, I said, this is it. It's over for us teachers that taught in the conventional way. The computer will be the leader. And then I saw this video that I posted on my blog from Apple, where they went into a school in England that was an impoverished school, and a forward-thinking principal went in there and totally got all of the entire school fitted out with iPads, and they had I forget, a failure rate of 80%, whatever. Only 20% of the kids were passing what they considered their standardized tests or whatever, whatever the standards were. And once they introduced it, within 1 year, okay, with the iPads alone, they were at an 80% success rate, okay? And a teacher no longer becomes the only didactic force in the classroom. The teacher becomes a facilitator, and you don't have kids sitting in single rows, sitting in a solitary seat, not allowed to talk to the kid beside them, not allowed to look over the other kid's shoulder. Now they're sitting in groups of 5 or 6 working together. So that's the first place I started to see where we were starting to have huge increases in education. And this week I saw, and comes after I went into a classroom where poor kids were so bored. You could just see that there was another day of school, another day they had to be quiet, another day they had to be talked to, another day of listening, another day of taking curriculum about things they weren't interested in and being forced to learn that curriculum because we say that curriculum is the right curriculum and it has nothing to do with the kids are really interested or what they will do later in life. And I noticed that and you'll see it in that video, that when I stopped talking and started asking questions and then started to engage the kids in a form of play, there was a total transformation, a total shift in energy. And now this teacher, who was a quantum physicist, who became an educator, did a study, and he wanted to find out why certain schools were effective and certain schools weren't. And he found it was due to the teacher's ability to teach. And if you've watched any of my blogs, you realize that I found a discovery one day. I said, how come I had to sit through so many painful, inept teachers my whole life? Boring and ineffective, but yet they were there. And I found out when I started to think one day, I don't know how the idea came to me, that there were basically maybe three great teachers I had in a lifetime. So I started to ask other people, especially educators, how many great teachers? And every time I talk to teachers, I ask them this, and I always get the same answer. It's about 3. There's never more than one hand raised when I ask them to show me by fingers the number of great teachers. And then I asked them what was great about them, and none of them had said anything about the fact that they were great speakers. They were great listeners, and they were great. They cared about the student. That was the 2 criteria they used. So now along comes the computer. Fast, colorful, musical, okay, all of the things. It encourages feedback. How's a teacher going to compete with this? Because most teachers aren't any good anyway. Sorry, folks, but that's the way it is. And now this teacher, this educator in India, decides that he wants to take the teacher out of the equation. What if he just introduces a computer? What will happen? And he finds out, and the basic thesis of it is that we've created a world where kids can teach themselves now how to learn. They will learn by themselves due to the technology we have. And that's exactly what happens. He puts a computer in a neighborhood in New Delhi, and the kids figure out in an hour, without any input from him or anybody else, 9 hours, how to surf the internet and download a game. And they had to do it in English, and they didn't speak English, but they figured out enough English to use the computer by themselves. Kids working not alone, but in a group, helping each other out. And he called it, they created a form of pedagogy that didn't exist before. So now he decides, people said, well, somebody must have come along and taught the kids how to use it. So he decided that what he would do is he would take the computer outside the city into the country where nobody had any aptitude at all with computers. And he does this, and the kids still learn the same ineffective way and they now know there was absolutely no input from an adult. The kids figured it out themselves. Make a long story short, the kids not only educate themselves how to use the computer, download games, they start teaching themselves English, they start teaching themselves history, they teach themselves whatever they're interested in. They move in those directions. They become smart. So he gets this incredible boost in the effectiveness of education by kids teaching themselves. And then he decides, well, let me do something. Where can the role of the teacher change in this thing? Because the teacher, he found out that there really didn't have to be a teacher there, but that there was an increase in productivity simply by having an adult present. And he didn't push the kids or influence the kid. He was just there. And he says, well, what if we introduce something called the grandmother effect? And the grandmother effect was basically, instead of criticizing the kids, instead of finding all the wrong answers that kids gave, she gave an encouragement for all the positive things, all the things they were doing that were effective. And now productivity went through the roof. So, what's the result? You'll see it in the interview that I did, or the classroom where I went in and kids were bored out of their minds. And I call it cramming curriculum into kids' craniums. That's got to stop. And we're in an age where the computer is going to do that. Kids will learn the things they want to learn. They're opting to do this already. And now schools, administrators, principals, whatever, get smart. Get rid of the old way. It's dead. And he said one of the worst things in Western schools is the kids come in with all these advanced computers and phones and iPads in their hands, and everybody's told to shut them off. Wrong. All right. Please stay tuned. Watch the next video of my attempting to get kids interested in a conventional classroom and what happens when I engage them in a game. And watch the energy shift and watch the enthusiasm. Watch the amount of imaginations that are being used by the kids and how effective it is. Thanks for listening.